after coming back from the war, didn't really work. He just sort of worked on the hustle. He always had a thing here, going there or there, or kind of sort of some scheme and dream happening. And he was selling used cars for a little bit for his friend uh, in Chicago. And one day he had to visit a businessman, also known as a loan shark. And this businessman was actually in an office, and he had a secretary, and it was her first job because she had recently been divorced after a 2-year marriage and a 7-year divorce. And her name was my mom. So my dad went into this businessman's office to meet his appointment. He saw the secretary, thought she was cute, which she was, and asked her out on a date, and it was uneventful, and they did not see each other again, which is clearly not the end of the story. 6 months later, after the interminable divorce was finally done, my mom decided to celebrate with her friends who were headed to Las Vegas, and so they all headed out for a divorce celebration weekend. At the same time, my dad had a plan going with one of his buddies, and they had targeted the heir to the TV guide fortune for some sort of scam to print coupon books in Las Vegas, way ahead of its time. So this is in the mid 60s. And they needed printing like press equipment. And the heir to the TV guide fortune had access to all this in a warehouse in California, but they all decided, because all three of them were degenerate gamblers, that they would stop in Vegas first for a quick little funsy, and then they would head in the car to California to finish the transaction. So they rented this big Cadillac, this big red Cadillac, and they drove from Chicago with the heir to the TV guide fortune to Las Vegas for a little funsy before the plot was to indeed thicken. And unfortunately, as these stories tend to go, they started out at the Stardust, where everything was comped and great because they were playing pretty big, and then after essentially the heir to the TV guide fortune went belly up, and all the other money that they had sort of squirreled off of that also went belly up. They were staying on Fremont Street, one of the hotels. So things started getting a little hairy with the TV guide guy because he was freaking out apparently, and so they got on a plane and headed back to Chicago, where my dad was supposed to follow with the Cadillac. So we had one last night in Las Vegas, and so he decided to head over to the Stardust Hotel, where he still had a little bit of juice left after this long weekend of indulgence. And while he was walking through the casino, there in line, being froze out of the Lido de Paris, was the divorce party. And he recognized my mom from the date 6 months earlier. And he said, hey, why are you waiting in line? I could take care of this for you. Because, when you're in Vegas and you just blow a shit ton of money, you can be a big man for a night. And so he not only got them into the show, but, pulled the whole casino routine. They got the booth, and my mom was like, hey, this guy does dealings with Harry Warner back in Vegas, or back in Chicago, here in Vegas. He can get us a comp like that. This guy must have it going on. And my dad said, well, tomorrow I'm headed to California in my Cadillac. You ever been to California? And my mom said, well, I have some family there. I'd love to go with you. Maybe we can talk about it. And talk about it they did in that hotel room that they were staying in at the Stardust. My mom had her own room, and then my mom and my dad had their own room, and then Wolverine. So the next morning they went down to the Cadillac, and as they were getting ready to drive to California, my mom, with her, unbeknownst to her, dream man for the rest of her life, at least his, he leaned over to her and said, do you have any money for gas? And that was absolutely the metaphor for the rest of their relationship for the next 43 years that they stayed together until he passed. So that's how I was conceived. 2 months went by, and Dad did not call Mom again. But Mom called Dad with some news. Shortly thereafter, what has now become known to me as the backdated wedding photo album. They got married, and I am in all those photos, unbeknownst. And then they had baby David. So there we were in Chicago, Dad doing what I'm going to lovingly call the honorable thing, and got into his relationship with my mom, and together they started to forge a life. And they didn't really, my dad wasn't really working, he was working at the used car place with his friend, and trying to make ends meet. And so they came up with a scheme, and that scheme was to allow bookmakers, although bookkeepers would have been a little more interesting, bookmakers to use the apartment as a front. And apparently in our apartment complex on the north side of Chicago, on Ashland and Pratt, there was a 4-story apartment complex, and the illegal bookmakers had 3 apartments in it with young families who would live in the living room, and then they would run a bookmaking operation out of the collection of the back rooms. And they would live there rent-free, and then during the daytime, the bookmakers would do their action and place all the bets and have all the wires and have all the telephones and the whole thing. I mean, it was just a real operation. So one day, the first floor, we were on the 3rd floor, the first floor family got busted. And so the police came, and it was a big deal. It was a big raid, and all the old bitty Jewish ladies who played mahjong, and we're all like, oh my God, can you believe what's happening? And so my mom, of course, freaked out, and she told my dad that this has to stop. My dad goes, of course it does. We can't, like, I think that whatever the equivalent of CPS was there, and they were taking the kids away and the whole thing. And so my dad went to the bookmakers, and he said, oh, so what's the game plan? How long are we going to lay low before we start back up again? Just kind of curious, and are you going to pay our bills in between time? And the bookmakers told my dad that they weren't going to shut down, but in fact they were going to double up their efforts and going to stay there late at night because they needed to sort of reestablish the lost profits in the center that was down below, and so that they would be there more often. And that if my dad had a problem with that, he needed to tell them right now, and in a way that my dad was not going to tell them right now. But what my dad did do was go to his friend who owned the car lot and asked him if he had a vehicle that he wouldn't miss that could make it to Las Vegas, where they decided to relocate indefinitely while things kind of calmed down, knowing that if they left, they would probably be left alone. But if they stayed, they would certainly still be in it. And since my dad's brother had already kind of forged the path, the John C. Fremont, if you will, of the Figler family, and established himself as a job at Caesar's Palace, spinning the big wheel, another story altogether, we had a place to go, someone to take us in. And so we drove in this station wagon, made it to Las Vegas, broke down almost right where my uncle lived, and we stayed with my uncle for the first 6 months while my dad got situated and got a job. There's this little thing in Las Vegas where, we put out a phone book every 6 months, or at least we did because of the population growth. And you would have to pay an extra couple of bucks to not have your name listed in the phone book. And they paid it every year, every 6 months. They would pay that fee to not have their name, just as the insurance policy, And they did that for 43 years. Their name was never in the phone book. And then, my dad passed in 2008. And my mom to this day still doesn't have the name listed in the phone book because, I don't know, maybe she thinks that there's, a ghost hustle on its way. And, you never know when you just kind of have to, pack it in and bug out. So that's my origin story. So that's it. That's my 3 days. That didn't go too long, did it? I went way too long. Okay. So now for one poem each, here's, it gives me great pleasure to be able to tell that story with friends and loved ones and, the digital recording that will be heard by 20 to 25 people over the course of the next 30 years. 30 people, possibly, and a bunch of octogenarians on their deathbed because they're big fans now. It gives me great pleasure to introduce this next gentleman who was sorely missed when he left Las Vegas, but unlike some people, he actually did come back, and we've been made much better for it. He's an essayist, he's a novelist, he's a great thinker, and a solid friend. And you should be lucky to have a guy in your life like Geoff Carter.
Hey, fellas. When we were drinking yesterday to all of our friends who croaked off, we forgot to drink to Doug Fry and to Scrubby, so we should do that now.
And to Julie, did we mention Julie?
No, we were only doing the suicides last night, so.
Yeah.
Doug Fry, Scrubby, I wish you were here.
Indeed.
That's not happening yet. Okay. I'm reading 2 pieces you haven't heard tonight and one that you have. I'm going to start with the one that you have just to get it out of the way, and I swear after this it's retired. You'll never hear it again. I'll never hear it again. Unless we listen to this fucking tape, which we won't. A friend once said to me, if a love survives Las Vegas, that love could survive anywhere. Anywhere in the world. He didn't mean it as a compliment. Nobody, and I mean nobody, believes we're going to make it. They're standing around outside and making rude comments about our lifestyle, our comportment, the way we express ourselves. They'd even lay bets against us if they could, but in here is where the betting happens, and they think they're too good to step foot in here. In here, we are unassailable. That's what the outsiders don't know and could never understand. They look in here and see volcanoes erupting and Rome burning. They see only the excesses and they think we're being consumed by them. We see a table for 2 at Spago and a patio bathed in eternal twilight. Atlantis is sinking a few hundred feet to the west, but we could take or leave it depending on how we feel after dessert. This is why we built a fucking civilization in the first place. So, after cocktails, dinner, and dessert, I suggest we walk off our trip to Rome. You smile and nod a wordless agreement, and as we glide out of the restaurant, we grab 2 packs of matches each, more than anyone needs to burn this indoor Rome to the ground. But you don't say that. Instead, you read the name of the restaurant aloud, take a moment to flip it over in your head and say, "Oh, gaps." Oh, gaps, I repeat. Oh, the gaps between us, the gaps between what people think Las Vegas is and what it really is, the gaps between what others think we can do and what we will do, the gaps between what are and what we could be, the gaps imposingly deep and wide that keep friends from becoming lovers. I think those are the gaps you're talking about. We walk onto the strip like we own it. Above the false light is the light of real stars, and even though we can't see it, we know it's there. We know we're still on Earth. We're not above or below things like belief and trust and love. We are the human parts of a pleasure machine, but we are not the machine, and this metropolis is not metropolis. We are not disconnected between the hands and the heart, waiting for a moderator to connect them. Las Vegas changes the people who live in it, as does London and Shanghai and Hollywood, but it doesn't take away the way we can taste music, see dreams, or feel words. And when someone takes our hand for the first time, someone that we've dreamt of, someone whose name is a whisper of honey on the tongue, that electricity, that bright and wonderful confusion trembles its way up our legs and arms and becomes rapture in our heart. If a love survives Las Vegas, that love could survive anywhere, my friend said bitterly. This town's too fucking small for something as big as 2 people in love. And I said, if I ever fall in love here, I'm gonna lose my head. Why? Because I've always wanted to. I've always wanted to. Yes, I know this is false light. I know there's no such thing as rivers of neon, glass pyramids, and indoor Rome. I know the assholes on the outside are right in their petty ways, that the machine is broken, and it's going to take years before we can fix it. Some of us feel trapped and all of us feel misunderstood, but we can't be faulted for wanting to give our hearts and our hands to something others consider illusory, temporary. We want to love. We want to love the world where that love was founded. And Las Vegas is part of that world, the same world that's big enough for anything. To a pair of dumbstruck suburban kids looking at this world through neon-tinted glasses, it could even be the center of the world. Is that me?
It's my phone. I'm sorry. I'm working on it. It's no one
So
else's.
pretty. We walk hand in hand through body-to-body crowds and cool slivers of empty space. Oh, gaps. And when we turn away from the people and the cars and the lights, we look at each other and we're thrilled to discover again that this is real. This is happening now. We are at the apex of the history of the world, surrounded by postcard civilizations, pyramids, palaces, colosseums, and all of it is enormous and distracting, yet not half as amazing as the feeling of your hand in mine. From here, the rest is easy. You lean against the railing in front of the mirage, and I fill my eyes with you, porcelain, soft and beautiful, bathed in the light of a metaphor. We lean close, and in the moment before our first kiss, the wind kicks up and pulls the scarf from your hair and throws it into the volcano's flames. You've lost your head, I say needlessly. Don't worry, darling, you say. I've always wanted to. This is Las Vegas, the place where we fell together. And it's here we're going to make a love that could survive anywhere in the world. It just won't be built in a day.